So tell me a little bit about how you got started working with patients with eating disorders.
Yeah, I mean, it was not the path I expected to be, very candid. In college, I was a strength and conditioning coach, and that was like my whole focus. I had like my 20-year plan laid out, like I was going to do this, this, and this, and work with these particular types of athletes. And senior year, I actually really messed up my back, and so I decided to diversify and study a lot more nutrition because that had been something that had been a key theme throughout my career as a strength and conditioning coach. So I went to get my master's and at Columbia for exercise physiology and nutrition. And during that process, I learned more about counseling. And meanwhile, I had still been coaching this whole entire time, all the way throughout my undergrad and graduate career. And throughout this whole entire time period, I had run into a lot of cases of disordered eating and eating disorders. And interestingly enough, I also struggled with a lot of disordered eating and eating disorder like behavior growing up. And so, after my whole entire experience and recovery and thinking about what I was going to do with my life, I had this strength and conditioning background. I had this counseling background and nutrition background, and I really wanted to continue counseling. And so I thought about it, like, what is a great position that I can continue to work on my skills and possibly incorporate all of my background knowledge in all these various areas. And that's really what drew me to the eating disorder field, because I felt like athletes and people who within the fitness industry, coaching, all these different populations were very much not receiving the services or education that they needed. And so, through that whole entire journey, it led me to Walden and connecting with Paula Quattromoni. And that's really when I just dove right in and was like, you know what, I'm just going to try to figure this out. And that's how I started working more with eating disorders and eventually started the GOLD program, which is an athlete-specific eating disorder program.
Yeah. I think that's so cool how you kind of came from it with your own experience and then just working in sports, because I think that I know we've talked about this before, but it is a little bit more, I think, even more so than our regular culture, but more so in like the fitness culture, to kind of normalize disordered eating, especially when it's you're attaching what you're eating to your performance.
Totally. And that was actually a reason why I was very passionate about it, was because everything that I was doing, that in retrospect, looking back, I was like, wow, that's very disordered, or like blatant eating disorder activity. People were praising me for it, and often, like I would go to a dinner or like this, or like doing all these various kind of actions, like ordering a specific meal or eating out of Tupperware and all this stuff, and people are like, oh no, he's an athlete, or like, he's just doing his bulking and cutting cycle. Like that, everyone would justify it, everyone would praise it. And I got lots and lots of positive reinforcement. And working with athletes all the time, it was really interesting because it was a sign of dedication. So, I mean, I talk about this in, when I give talks to coaches and athletes, and the common denominator throughout is that a lot of times eating disorder symptomology and eating disorder consequences are often chalked up as a sign of dedication and discipline and excellence and perfectionism and pain tolerance, all these things that make a great athlete become merged with the disorder. So it flies under the radar. And in a culture where everyone says, like, winning is everything, do whatever it takes, and that's the be-all, end-all, it can lead to a lot of severe athlete eating disorders that go unnoticed.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I see that a lot, just even if you're not an athlete, if you're, oh, she's just someone who works out a lot, she really takes care of her body, all of those things I hear, and
Yeah.
you're like, well, that's not really taking care of it, unfortunately. So,
Yeah, totally.
for a trainer or a coach, what are some things that we can look out for when we're training our clients, or if we have a new client come in or a new student come in? Are there specific questions we can ask on like an initial intake or just through our initial interview with them?
Yeah, there are lots of great tools out there, and from my experience, these tools are effective only as effective as the mindset and perspective. And if you think about it in general, that's the same thing for coaching and strength and conditioning. Like, you could write the same program and it could be implemented in so many different ways. And it's all regarding kind of like how you're approaching this. We can also think about like a recipe. So, for instance, I could get a recipe and Gordon Ramsay could get the same recipe, and I guarantee you that it will end up with different results.
Right.
Because the lens in which they're looking at it is very different. So, I'll talk about the assessments and the warning signs. First and foremost, I think it's really critical to take a step back and think about a moment what your viewpoint is. And so oftentimes, like before I do anything, I'm always thinking from the mindset of like the Hippocratic Oath, which is the first tenet is do no harm. So it's really, when you have that at the forefront of your mind, that really trumps everything. And so not only is this ethically sound, but it also allows you to kind of figure out, how are you going to get this person to be consistently dedicated and working with you and really enjoying your sessions? Because if they're mentally and physically unstable and they're constantly getting harmed, you're not going to really have a client for that long. So when you enter that mindset, and then you can start tapping into the various tools. And the best tool that you can use before administering any formal assessment is something that most successful coaches and trainers already do, which is building rapport and making sure that the client feels at home and feels safe and is really fostering this appropriate environment. And so I really try, before I even ask any questions, to get a gauge of where this person is at. Because something that can really confound a lot of your assessments is that eating disorders are often mired in lots of secrecy and shame and all these negative feelings. So you could administer the best assessment in the whole entire world, but if you don't have rapport, if the person does not feel safe with you, if the person does not trust you, if the person feels uncomfortable in your environment, they're walking in and they're seeing all these things that are very triggering or just makes them feel unsafe, they're not going to give you an accurate readout on your assessment. They'll probably not be reporting that they're engaging in certain types of behaviors. They'll be crafting a particular message to fit within a particular environment. It's really important to note that oftentimes, like when you're doing these assessments, this might be the first time you're meeting someone. So unless you build rapport right away and build that trust and safety and that judgment of like inclusivity and really making sure that this person knows that you're there to work with them and to collaborate with them and not just to tell them to do stuff, until that happens, it's really unwise, in my personal opinion, to like delve into an assessment because you might not be getting an accurate readout. Now, once you've built all of that and you really get like a sense of how this person is in relation to how they carry themselves and their overall demeanor, if they are relaxed, if they are being genuine and sincere because they feel safe, from there, you can assess from a variety of standpoints. So, I always do an assessment to begin with, and the way I do it is not in this really formal manner. I always kind of ease in the conversation, like tell me why you're here, etc., all this different stuff. And this will actually provide you with a lot of hints regarding maybe their perspective. Because if someone comes in and they're like, oh yeah, I want to lose 40 pounds, in the training and coaching industry, people are like, oh yeah, all right, cool, all right, and so they're going through the rest of the assessment, and that just like flew right over their head. And a lot of times they're like, oh well, should I consult the eating disorder list, or like, this person doesn't look like they have an eating disorder, they just come in with these goals that I hear all the time. So the way people talk about stuff is really important. So doing a regular assessment before it actually does a lot of eating disorder screening right off the bat, because if you're doing a past medical history, does this person have a record of anemia? Do they have lab values available? Are they abnormal? Do they have a history of osteoporosis or osteopenia? Have any recent illnesses, bone stress fractures, injuries, surgeries, any physical or mental health conditions? Are they taking supplements? Are they taking medications? If they're a female, do they have a regular menstrual cycle? How's their sleep? How's their stress? And this, quote unquote, is nothing eating disorder specific, but the more you work in the field, oftentimes you begin to notice patterns. Like, wow, this person has 3 stress fractures. This person is chronically anemic. This person has, all these different things. And once again, that doesn't mean they have an eating disorder, but it's giving you a little glimpse and helping you like build that overall picture of why this person is here and their overall lifestyle. Because viewed from a vacuum and just in your training facility, the assessment might look totally okay if you're assuming context of just you and your facility. But if you're getting a bigger overall picture, guaranteed when you're working with a client weeks down the line, you get to learn more about them and their general overall habits and their performance and all this different stuff. A lot of the stuff that you ask in the beginning will be present later on. So if the person is like, you can also ask and like about their weight and all this different stuff if they're comfortable. And if it is something they're comfortable, they might start talking about it nonstop. And it's simple little questions like, oh, do you, like, how often do you weigh yourself? And the person's like, oh, 4 times a day, like, ding, ding, ding. You know, it's not really, quote unquote, eating disorder specific, but this is giving you a lot of clues and information about their relationship with food, their relationship with their body, their relationship with their weight, their relationship with physical activity, their stress levels, their patterns, etc. And this will vary from client to client because some will talk more, some less. And from there, you know, you're getting all this information. And if you do suspect an eating disorder, or if you just want to be safe, a really great tool is the REDS, the REDS clinical assessment tool. And this is something that's available online. And what this does is it screens for abnormal menstruation, eating disorder behaviors, low energy availability, low overall BMI, irregular menstrual cycles. All of these different points will build up a point system that you can then start to scale for certain individuals. There is a flaw with the system, as you probably already are taking note mentally, in the sense that it says low BMI or it says menstrual cycles. So this leaves a couple people at risk in the sense that there are plenty of individuals at higher BMIs who will never score on that system, but could have a severe eating disorder. And there are also plenty of males out there who don't have, obviously, a menstrual cycle, and it will be harder to kind of interpret based on those questions. So, using your regular assessment tools and just getting a sense of their life and building that understanding of their relationship with all the various components that we talked about, and then also possibly administering the REDS clinical assessment tool, this can help start building a picture. And from there are a variety of other tools that I could talk about that can help you kind of clear out some other details if needed.
Yeah. I love how you kind of brought up that first step of being like taking a look at your own thoughts about food and your body before you kind of start listening to someone else. Because a lot of times when, as a trainer, you hear that, oh, I want to lose X amount of pounds, it's like, okay, another person who wants to lose weight. Whereas I don't have the statistic on me, but I know that there's a large percentage of people who will seek the help of a trainer or a dietitian for weight loss end up having an eating disorder or some sort of disordered eating patterns. And I also really love the idea of not separating it. It's not like, okay, here's my eating disorder assessment and here's my regular assessment. It's like you can kind of combine everything. And I know you've talked about this before, but it's like creating that culture of awareness where you're kind of always on the lookout for this stuff, whether it be like on the really extreme end, which is probably where someone might meet those REDS criteria, or the less extreme end where someone's just coming in and they're feeling really self-conscious in their body and they're maybe having some compensatory issues with food and exercise, where you kind of always have open eyes to that. And it's not just about, okay, here are my eating disorder questions and here are my regular people questions, or however you want to separate it.
No matter if you're training someone who is, struggling with eating disorder or not, a lot of the fundamentals will remain. I train a lot of different athletes who are severely underfueling that are not disordered eating and are not eating disorder, struggling with those aspects. They just simply don't know how to fuel. They simply don't have the awareness. No matter what, even if the person doesn't have an eating disorder, if the person's not fueling, it's really important to adjust your training as such. And so whether the person has an eating disorder or not, like, the rules are going to be very similar in that respect. It's just the overall intervention down the line might be a little bit more different.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also just kind of highlighting what you said before too about how someone in a larger body or who falls higher on that BMI scale might kind of get unnoticed because again, a lot of times I know this just from working in the training industry, you have two clients who come in, one happens to fall in a higher BMI category and the go-to is like, okay, how can we basically prescribe under fueling, over exercising, extreme monitoring of weight or food or calories, whereas someone in a smaller body, it might be easier for a trainer to be on kind of like the more awareness end of the eating disorder, if that makes sense.
Totally. And, this happens all the time, which is why I often go back to perspective as for a plan of defense. Because if you are looking at this with the wrong lens, it doesn't matter whether you have every eating disorder check sheet or whatever, you will just be blind to your biases and cognitive distortions, and then you fall to your own. For people who are interested in working with the right lens, I often encourage them to look at every size material because reading that they would be very surprised. Oftentimes, you find people very surprised by their assumptions. Like, wow, I didn't really know that. I didn't really think about that. That I actually do treat people differently. That when someone who is petite in figure says, I want to lose 20 pounds, I say, that's not okay. And then when a larger individual says, I want to lose 20 pounds, I go, okay, how do we do that?
Mm-hmm. So if someone listening or watching thinks that they have a client who might have an eating disorder that is probably outside of their scope, how could they kind of approach that with their client to get them the help that they need?
Yeah, totally. There are different categories in which you can take note of things that might be contributing to an eating disorder. And these fall into physical, emotional, and behavioral. So from a physical standpoint, if there's rapid weight loss or rapid changes in their body, this could be a dead giveaway. In some cases of underfueling. In larger clients or clients who are not experiencing it, doesn't mean that it's not going on. It's just one of the warning signs. If they're frequently dehydrated, if you find that they have low heart rate, low blood pressure, dizziness, they're always complaining of being cold, they have lack of energy, they're having lots of GI problems, electrolyte abnormalities, expectations of happiness, success, and being in control is like really tightly knit with their level of distress, all this different stuff. That could be an example of like physical signs that they're like really tense if things are not going their way, or their body language changes when their expectations aren't meeting reality. These can all kind of provide hints or conversation starters. From an emotional standpoint, if someone is like really preoccupied about weight, food, dieting, body image, they're like constantly talking about it, like, oh, like when we've been working so hard, but like when is this going to make my stomach go away? Or all this different body talk. If that's constantly coming up, that could be something that could be a warning sign. Same thing with language that really indicates like very inflexible thinking or just very self-critical, lack of emotional expression. If someone's really flat all the time, or on the opposite, they're having explosive and they're agitated or depressed and anxious, or really just feel like they have like these obsessive compulsive thoughts. These are things that you'll begin to see if you get a good overall baseline and understand that maybe things are shifting over time. Yeah. And then from the behavioral standpoint, if, as we mentioned before, if they're not eating their pre-workout meals or like keep on coming back and they get gassing during their sessions and they're like, yeah, like I haven't eaten that much today, and this is just like a common reoccurring theme throughout your sessions, or if they're constantly doing extra exercise sessions. Okay, we made up a plan for 4, and it looks like you're really tired. Well, I did double sessions last night. Okay, like that's once again a hint that maybe something is going on in those respects, or if they have rituals around food, or they get very aggravated if you cut back their volume or change the workout routine from a performance standpoint, but it really clashes with maybe some of their views regarding what they need to do during a session in order to accomplish a particular goal. These are all warning signs. So from there, that's really the sign to intervene. If you are noticing warning signs, don't let it go, because this could be your opportunity to reach out. And as we kind of discussed before, like how do you do this if you suspect this is going on? You have to have that trust and rapport and feeling of safety really built in. And using motivational interviewing skills can be really helpful, but if you're not familiar with that, open-ended questions and avoiding being like accusatory or insinuating stuff and just really approaching with curiosity is one of the best things that you can do in the sense of just checking in. And this is something that's, really helpful even if the person doesn't have any sort. It's like, hey, how's everything been going? How are our sessions? And what you can point out in the sense of like in a private environment where they're not around other people and you guys feel safe and can have a nice conversation is after you're checking in, you can kind of stick with the facts and observations and say, I've noticed over time that it's been really, you've been having a lot of difficulty eating the pre-workout meals that we've been talking about, or it seems like I've noticed, and I could be wrong, that you've just been really stressed lately, or you've been telling me like all this different stuff, or I've noticed that you've been doing extra sessions. Can you tell me more about that? And this could all be stuff that's leading into an eating disorder, but it's really important to check in with them and lead with the curiosity and ask these open-ended questions. And they might, if they feel comfortable already, they might disclose to you that they're struggling with stuff. However, in a lot of cases, someone can also expect to see a lot of defensiveness or denial, and that doesn't mean that they don't have an eating disorder, or that doesn't mean that it's a lost cause or you should never talk about that again. It's just what they're probably communicating to you in that moment is that they're not ready to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, if they talk about it, then you can listen to them, and active listening is just like the best thing that you can do in these situations. Non-judgmental, inclusive, positive, and supportive in the sense that you're like, hey, I'm really glad you opened up to me. Like, I really appreciate that. That must have taken a lot. Like, I really appreciate you being truthful or candid, etc. All this different stuff. And from there, you can ask, is like, do you have any thoughts of where we go from here? And they'd be like, yeah, I've been thinking about seeing a registered dietitian or a therapist. And that's an opportunity. It's like, oh, tell me more about that. And if they don't have any ideas, like, once again, asking for permission. Hey, like, I have worked with a lot of clients who struggle with eating disorders or disordered eating, or have questions about their relationship with their body, their food, physical activity. Would you be open to talking to someone that can help you explore that a little bit further? And if they say no, once again, it shuts it down and you reapproach it at a different time. But if they say yes, you can start interacting and supporting them in that way. So from there, you can help guide them into a supportive environment with a multidisciplinary team based on your connections, or at least encourage them to seek help if they're open to it. So if the person, let's say, is not ready, which is totally fine, you can just say, once again, leave the door open in the sense of you can express your concern, and it's like, well, if you ever are struggling, just feel free to reach out. I'm always open, and I can talk about it, or if you want to talk about someone else, I know a variety of people who, if you're ever having trouble or challenging thoughts or behaviors regarding these things, like there's lots of resources. And let's say they come back to you later on, then once again, they might be open and you can help them guide. But let's say there's another situation where they're just not, they are in denial, or they're not ready, and you are very concerned. There will have to come a point where no matter what the situation, if someone had a broken ankle and they're like, no, I need to run, it's like, look, like, we've talked about this in the sense that if you're open to maybe having some services, like I can refer you to a physical therapist or a doctor, etc., who can maybe help you in this respect. And if they're not ready for that, then it's like, look, like with your broken ankle, I'm really concerned for your safety, and from my overall experience, I just don't feel comfortable continuing to train with this going on. So the same thing could be said for an eating disorder in the sense that you're not accusing them or, etc. You could just state your comfort level. And oftentimes that could be something that turns it around as opposed to, it's like, oh, like I don't train people who struggle with eating disorders, this or that. It's just like, I just don't feel comfortable if one of my clients is not consistently fueling for a session because I get very concerned for their safety. And you can reassure that it's like, you're doing this not because you're judging, but it's more along the lines of, first and foremost, my job is to keep someone safe. And from my experience, when someone is struggling with these things, it really detracts from our sessions, and I don't see it as a good fit if this is not able to be addressed. And that leaves the doors open in the sense the person might turn around and like, okay, I guess I'll deal with it. Or if they really, can't talk about it and they're not ready to respect your comfort levels and respect your safety as a trainer or a coach, then unfortunately, in those instances, it might be one of those cases where you have to say, when you are ready to talk about it, you can come back, but for now, maybe we have to take a little break. Based on my own personal level. And I think that's like one of the best things that a coach and trainer can do is asserting their own needs. Because if you're unhappy, they're going to be unhappy. If the client's unhappy, you're going to be. It's a very symbiotic, mutual relationship. It's not one person dragging the other person around.
Yeah, and I think that just builds further trust with your client. So if they do come back one day, they can say, wow, that I really needed to hear that. Because I think so often what ends up happening when someone is struggling is, one, they want someone to notice. It is very secretive, but at the same time, because like you were saying earlier, it's so praised, right? So many people who have a lot of these disordered behaviors around food are very much praised for those behaviors, and they are really just hoping that someone notices that they're unhappy underneath all of that. And then two, a lot of times people need to have a lot of like very small interventions to actually go seek help. And so if you can just be one of those smaller interventions, then sometimes that can kind of be coupled with something a friend says or something a family member says or something another coach says that kind of pulls everything together and actually gets that person to get help. So I would also say, like, don't feel discouraged if that is the situation. But I also think it's more often than not the person will come around and take your advice, especially if you have built that rapport over time.
Yeah, totally. So there's lots of opportunities, and if you keep the door open, if you're an active listener, all these things that you talked about, that could be actually one of those powerful interventions. And like you said, sometimes people just want to be heard. Some people just want someone to be a witness to their struggles and have that understanding, supportive, non-judgmental voice. And although they might not be ready, they'll remember that, and then you could be the person that they've touched, reach out again when they are ready. So.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was so informative, and I hope everyone who's watched got a lot of good stuff taken away from it. Can you tell everyone where they can find more about you?
Yeah, totally. So I work with Walden Behavioral Care, and I work with the Goals Program. So if you Google Walden Behavioral Care Goals Program, that will bring you to the page, and you'll be able to meet the team. And I'm on the team page that provides blog information. That I've been writing a lot of blogs specific to athletes and people who are struggling with the eating disorder, as well as a variety of resource guides and information that I've helped develop with the team. And so we have a really great resource guide at waldeneatingdisorder.com /eating-disorders-in-sport. And so that right there is another great resource. So on the page, you'll be able to learn more about what I do, but also delve into everything regarding my actual work within Walden.
Awesome. Well, I'll include that link in this blog post so people can head on over there. Thanks so much again.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.